Hello, hi everybody, and thank you for joining us at the Microsoft Fabric UK user group. I'm your host, Leon Gordon, and as always, we're back to bring you data people some fantastic walkthroughs with Microsoft professionals, Microsoft MVPs, and also Microsoft employees. Those of you that are keen-eyed will know that I'm actually on my own today. Unfortunately, my co-host Pragati Jain is not feeling too well, so she's left me to try to keep things together in her absence. So as always, please do let us know where in the world you're joining us from, how the weather's been for you today. So I'm smiling. I can't smile any bigger because we've actually had some sunshine and we've had figures in Celsius of a temperature of double digits, which is a good day for us in February in the UK. So with that being said, today's session is going to be another riveting session, and we're going to look at how to leverage Microsoft Fabric and Power BI with Direct Lake with Zoe Douglas. Now, Zoe is a product manager for Power BI analysis services at Microsoft, and she's focused on unlocking big data scenarios, but dedicated to helping customers get the most out of their data. So let me go ahead and bring Zoe onto screen. Zoe, thank you for joining us, I should say, this morning.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for having me. This is really great to be able to speak to you all today about Direct Lake.
Excellent. We're really excited for this session, so I'm not going to hold it up at all. I'm going to let you dive straight in, and I'll pop into the background to moderate the comments for you.
Sounds good. If you want to go ahead and also share my screen, perfect. So I have just a few slides, and then we'll get into what I want to focus on is kind of just demoing this. So first up, this is me. So thank you, Liam, for the lovely introduction. I just put this on here. So I have a kind of personal website where I do post additional blogs, especially on Direct Lake topics lately. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I also do have an account on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Not as good as keeping up on that one, but generally I keep up on the LinkedIn. So please go ahead and follow me there. And as Ian said, so I'm focusing on, so I'm doing a lot of work with Direct Lake, and also, the DAX query view, and, calculation groups, bringing kind of this more tooling into desktop for semantic models. All right, so let's go get into Direct Lake. All right, so I'm sure most of you have probably seen this slide now about, Microsoft Fabric, and everything is on the one lake. And this is critically important for Direct Lake, right? So the whole point, the Direct Lake works because your data is in the one lake. And so that's kind of just to really quickly go over this, right? And then once it's in the one lake, it's available not only for Direct Lake models, but, everything else that we have in Fabric. So I'm just going to skip past that one and give a quick overview of what is Direct Lake, right? So we have the direct query and import modes, and then Direct Lake is now accessing those. It's like direct query in that I don't have to schedule a refresh, and I don't have to, and I can get the latest data available, which is in the one lake. But it does it like import. And the reason why is because in direct query, we're actually converting those DAX queries to SQL queries, right? So you have a translation layer, and then we're relying on the underlying source to kind of bring that data back quickly. And then we actually then display it in the visuals. In import, we've already brought the data in and put it into a nice format that analysis services can read. And so when it runs the DAX queries, it just grabs it from the data. Well, the Parquet, the Delta tables, the Parquet format is also the same format that analysis services can read. So that's why we're able to just run those DAX queries and run those DAX queries on the One Lake Delta tables, right? So that's the magic behind Direct Lake. So we have this demo here, but I'm not going to play this. I'm actually going to live demo here in just a minute. One of the things I wanted to, so this is kind of looking at the performance, like how fast this is. This is 3 billion rows on Direct Lake. They're coming in sub-second. When I had the same model built in Direct Query, right, then we can see much slower times, like 4 seconds, right, for the same visual. And we're able to do this because of the SQL Analytics endpoint, right? So what's cool about using the Lakehouse and SQL Analytics endpoint is that I'm not limited, right? So once I have I can use the lakehouse to bring in the data. It sets up that SQLinex endpoint. I can use direct lake mode. I can use direct query mode, or I can use import mode, right? I can actually do all three off of that, depending on which way I want to go. So if you have something like, oh, well, I really want to do this certain thing that's not available yet, you can do it in the other modes as well. Now, one of the things, so I'm going to get into, I'm going to do the live demo, but this is something that I've been thinking about recently, and I wanted to kind of share with you kind of how does this differ from, say, creating an import model versus a direct lake model? Wait, should you be thinking about this? So this one we have the storage mode. So where is it being stored, right? So these, we talk about direct query, import, and direct lake. That's a storage mode, right? So are we importing the data? Are we just direct querying it to the source? Are we using the one lake, right? So here we have in direct lake, so Power Direct Lake only works if you have your tables in Delta tables. This is really important for those of you who are using views, and we'll get into that in just a minute. For Power BI import only works if you have your tables in Power BI, right? So if you have a view in your data warehouse right now, and it's in your SQL data warehouse, like right now before we did Direct Lake, right, you would set up your Power Query to go get that view, and what it's doing is actually putting it into the analysis services storage, right? It's not reading that view, right? So in the Direct Lake, if you want to have a view in a SQLinex import, you still have to materialize that as a Delta table for Direct Lake to work on it. Otherwise, it's going to be still in SQL. We have to translate, and that's when it's going to do the fallback to direct query, right? So I just wanted to kind of bring this as a way of thinking. Then you want to add some data sources, so in Power BI for import, you go to transform data, you're in Power Query, and now you're bringing those going to different data sources and bringing that data in and making them tables in your semantic model, right? Now in Direct Lake, you would do that in the lakehouse, right? So you're going to go to different sources. You're going to bring them in as Delta tables. Now, what's cool here is you're not limited to just Power Query, right? You can have a notebook. You can have a data flow, data factory. We can have data flows, so you can still have the Power Query. All of that, right? We're not limited. There's more in there. That's the only ones I can think of at the top of my head, right? So you can bring them in, and then you bring them in as Delta table. You can even shortcut, right? So now you can shortcut. So maybe you've already created them in one lake somewhere. You can shortcut and bring it into the lake house. You can shortcut other lake sources into the lake house, right? Once we get it in, but now they're Delta tables, right? And now it's the same, right? Now you go to creating a new semantic model of a lake house. Sorry. And then now you're going to create your relationships, your measures, your calculation groups, RLS, whatever you want to do here. And then the same for import, right? So once you've done with the Power Query layer, you're going to go basically just bring in those tables. You can disable bringing in the table in Power Query as well, right? You can have a table in there that doesn't show up in your model, right? So we're bringing those tables in. We're doing our semantic modeling. And then once we're done with that, we create reports, and then we share those reports, right? So the bottom three layers really are different. Now, the only thing with Direct Lake right now is you're limited to doing it in the web, and the web modeling experience versus desktop. We are going to bring in, of course, desktop into the mix as soon as we can. So I hope this is kind of a good overview. So if we're thinking about it from kind of what import does and what Direct Lake is doing and how it's accessing that storage mode. All right, so I have another one here. So now we talk about fallback, right? So it's really cool that we have this kind of SQLinex endpoint that's kind of created automatically when you create the lakehouse. But this is kind of where you can run SQL queries. So you can go to the SQLinex endpoint and run SQL queries, which is actually very nice. And we also have this kind of fallback to DQ. So what happens here is we create our Direct Lake model. And then if we can read the Direct Lake Delta tables directly, we do Direct Lake, right? If there's a problem with that, we fall back and then read it through the SQLinex endpoint. Now we have that SQL translation layer. It's going to be a little slower, right? And we have, so I'm going to do a little demo here. We have there's some Direct Lake behavior options that we added in a few months ago, but the UI is just releasing now. I have a blog, but I haven't put it up yet. So So let's go. I'm going to switch out of the PowerPoint. I have some links here as well. Where it's not trans. Oh, there it goes. Right. So we have some direct lake things and about the model exploring calc groups. And I'm going to show a demo now. All right. So let's see. Okay, so here I am. I'm in my Fabric trial workspace, right? And I have created a lake house already. It's just to save time. It didn't take very long to actually create this. I have a script on my website. Let me just go quickly to grab that. So it's in this one. So if I come over here, let's see. Right, so I have my blog here. And in my blog, I have create a Power BI Direct Lake model in Fabric. And the way I created this one is I just ran a script that will create some fact table and some dim tables, right? And so I made a billion row fact table and some dim tables for it. Now you can bring in your data any way you like, just have to land it in as delta tables. And so once I have it in my lakehouse, and then I can see this data here. Right, so I've already brought in.
Zoe, I hope you don't mind me jumping in. We do have an interesting question coming in that I think is quite on point for this moment in time. And the question comes in from Jake Duddy, and it's in regards to Direct Lake and Fallback. And Jake asks, is the query engine the same for Direct Lake and Fallback, just with a SQL translation layer, or what is the real difference?
Yeah, I think it's probably a bit more complicated, but the idea is that DAX query we can just read the delta tables natively, right? Like it was imported. We are of course going to the one lake to read those delta tables, and then you're right. There's a translation layer for when it falls back to direct query. It's just the same as if you had, like, say in your model you had a table in import and a table in direct query, or you had the hybrid table, which actually has kind of a direct query partition, right? So you can have kind of a measure, honestly, that you can say sum it from the import table or sum it from the direct query table. And then you can say, have a slicer and says, I want to see this from the direct query. I want to see this from the import, right? So it's just that kind of way it's transitioning. It's just basically transitioning the storage mode. It's transitioning how it's going to answer that DAX query. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but basically that's it. It's kind of just like an automatic switch to kind of how it's going to answer that DAX query.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Zoe.
You're welcome. All right, so here I brought in my data. Now if I can bring in more data, right? So I can actually go, I can do a pipeline. I can do the data flow. I don't know, but event stream, you can do that. And you can even do a shortcut. So say I have the shortcut, and this is actually pretty cool for if you have an import model and you've done one lake integration, right? I can bring a table from my import model as well. Like say this is an import model that I have, and I've already set up one lake integration. So that way on the refresh of the import, it's actually putting those tables in one lake as well. And I can add it to any lake house, right? So I can come in here, I can see, okay, it's the same model. Shocking, I have a lot of these models. I want to bring in this one, I can, right? So I can create this one. So the data is all still in the one lake. I can access it into this lake house wherever I want. So this is what I mean by, this is where you're going to combine all your data from those multiple data sources as delta tables to be used in your model. All right, so now I have my second one here. I'm pretty sure this is an import, probably a subset, but we can just bring it in and take a look at it, right? And then I can switch over to my SQL endpoint, and I can even write SQL queries, right? So that's what the SQL endpoint is. It's, so you can write SQL. It's kind of like Spark SQL off of these tables in the Delta Lake, in the lake house. All right, so let's go ahead and create the new model. So now we want to do direct lake. Fantastic. So let's go to new semantic model. This is my custom direct lake model, right? I can even put in another workspace if I like. And I don't see my shortcut right now, so it just may just not have refreshed. And then if I wanted those views, now we're hiding the views by default. This is something new that we just did. Because those views will always fall back to direct query. It's not a great experience. We want to kind of make sure you know when you bring in those views what you're signing up for, right? So that's what we have. If you show the views, even though I don't have it, I'm now showing them. You know, they can be added to this direct lake semantic model, but DAX queries such as visuals, relationships, and measures using the views will fall back to direct query, and this can affect query performance, right? So we want to be open with you that this is going to be a fallback experience. If you're okay with that, generally, sometimes, honestly, it's pretty fast as well. Just know that that's going to impact. All right, so I'm going to bring these data in. And now I'm in, once these get brought in, now I'm just going to be creating a direct lake model, right? So I can add in my, do anything. We're bringing in a lot more functionality into the kind of the web modeling experience. And you can also use XMLA. So you can use Tabular Editor. You're no longer blocked from going back into the web modeling experience after you've touched it with, say, Tabular Editor as well, right? That restriction has already been lifted. There are some limitations on it. Documentation is getting updated now, but there are some things that, you know, you just got to be careful of what you're doing over there. Okay, so let's go to here, right? I'm just going to create some relationships. Now we can do the drag and drop. I am dragging from the fact table to the dim table because I know that's how it's going to auto-populate from the many to one, right? If you do it the other way, this way, right, you're going to end up with kind of the wrong direction here, and you'll have to kind of change it. So I already knew what the default was going to be, so I didn't create it that way. Another way you can create these is now we've also included the Model Explorer over here, and I can create them now in the Properties pane. So if you have a lot of tables, which a lot of times with some of them, especially in production ones, you have a lot of tables here, you can go ahead and simply do it here, and you're just going to do each one as, if you already know where they are, you can just add them in, right? And then you can add that relationship. Now we can also, let me just go create the other ones real quick. So we'll do our date, and either way is kind of fast. If we, this one's not so bad to kind of just do it one by one anyway. What's also very cool is when we added in the property pane relationship grid, we enabled multi-select. So you can select multiple, delete them. I want to put in assume referential integrity here. And there we have it. So now I've created my relationships. I can go ahead and create measures. Let's actually pick a table first. I want to use my measure group. Right. Let's see, I probably should have installed Tabular Editor so I could do it just in Tabular Editor too. Count rows. So let's see how many rows are in my sales table here. And then let's go ahead and add the sales measure. We have full intelligence. Here we go. And let's do costs. I'm just going to do one more after this. Okay, and then we'll do some profit. Equals sales minus costs. Okay, so we added all those in. I can even format them, right? So if I want to do my costs, profit, and sales, I want to do those as currency with no decimals. These numbers are very big. And now I want to make this one with just 1,000 separator, right? So I've added those in. I can do, so if I flip back over the tables real quick, right? So I have my measure group. I can just simply hide those columns and actually make it a proper one. So it pins up at the top, has the right icon. I have a date table. I can mark this as a date table here. right? So I have my date table. I can create hierarchies, all that kind of stuff, all that good stuff that you could do. I'm just going to quickly format this one. We don't have, okay, so we have the custom here. I always pick my monthly as a date time so it orders properly without me having to do a sort by. And then I just format it here, right? So this is just kind of regular modeling actions. I'm just doing it on the direct lake. I filed the bug for that. It's getting fixed soon, but it doesn't actually do anything wrong. Right, so let's just do this one as a custom one as well. So I grew up in Australia and then I moved to the US. So my short format for date is always confused. So I always end up using this one just to make sure I know what I'm looking at. Right? So I've added all this, and now I can even add in a calculation group. Right? So I have this available to me now in the web modeling experience, right? So we can say it's going to turn on implicit measures. Okay, so you can no longer drag and drop those data columns in, and that's fine by me, right? And so we have our first calculation group here. I'm not going to fill that in. I do have a blog when I added in the calculation group authoring that has some examples like all the time and tells you to just copy and paste. If we have time, if you want to see that, we can do that as well. All right, so I have my basic model here. Now I can, now this is live, this is done, right? It's ready to use. Sometimes what we've seen is, we're working on fixing it right now, but if you run into this and you are falling back to direct query immediately, sometimes this happens. So let's go see if this is happening today. Okay, so I'm going to open up, I'm going to build my report using Power BI Desktop. I prefer to do it in desktop. You can just click that new report and do it in the web, but I find desktop is has a bit more features that I like to use. Right, so to go find this model, I'm just going to go to the One Lake Data Hub, and there's my custom Direct Lake model. I'm going to go ahead and connect and start building my report. So now let's show you, if you're kind of curious, is this falling back to direct query? This is how you would know that it's happening. So here's all my stuff here, my rows. I'm going to make this a card. Let's see if you're working. Right? You see it's kind of being a little slow on the first go round. That's because it's also double checking with that SQL endpoint if you have access, or if there's any row level security on the SQL Analytics endpoint. If you put row level security on the SQL Analytics endpoint, you will always fall back to direct query, right? So that's one of the things you want to try and avoid if you want to have a good direct lake experience. If you're going to put row level security on the SQL Analytics endpoint, you're better off actually starting and doing the whole modeling in direct query, in pure direct query, instead of trying to go through direct lake, because it will never work. Right now, it never will work. And I don't think we have planned, we're not sure if we're going to be able to do that one in the near term, right? So you want to see if this one's falling back or not. We can go to the Performance Analyzer, refresh the visuals, and we can see there's no direct query line. So this one is actually not falling, but this is actually direct query. On the second go round, you'll see if it's slow enough, sometimes you'll see a transient direct query line. That's it's checking your permissions on the SQL Analytics endpoint. So periodically it still will, I think it's every 10 minutes or so, it'll say, hey, just double checking you didn't add row level security there. And you'll see it, if you get it, if it's slow enough, you'll see it like a direct query, and then when it's done, the direct query line will go away. It's because it's actually not accessing the data direct query, it's just running a check. Right, so we have this, and this is running. Now this is 1 billion rows of data, right? I didn't schedule a refresh, I didn't do anything here to do this, and I can bring in some more data here, right? And we have this running right now. I have another report, so I'm a little bit lazy. Let me see if I can find it, that I built using a different one.
Hi, Zoe.
Yes,
Sorry
go
to
ahead.
dive back in, but once again, this question is fairly on point for where we are throughout the session. So this comes in from Jude's Ice Cream, and it's a side question. Will DAX Query Editor reach this screen at some point? So this is in reference to the Performance Analyzer screen, I believe. They mentioned they would feel more comfortable in DAX being able to test their DAX queries.
Yeah, you mean the DAX Query view?
I believe
If you
so,
mean the
yes.
DEX, yeah, absolutely. We're bringing it in for like the live connection, right? We are working on bringing the DAX query view here for this scenario, and also, trying to bring it in for the web as well, right? So those are on our kind of roadmap. Let me see. Oh, I wanted to show those were kind of slow, and I wanted to see if I could see it, right? So you see, this is terrible, right? It was doing those checks. Now I refresh again. It's also warm, but it's also now doing direct link. But this one, I wish I'd caught it, because it'll show that kind of transient one where it's doing that check to the SQLite endpoint, right? Now, I know my tables are good. They're going to run in direct link. I don't have a view from the SQLite endpoint. I don't have row level security on that SQLite endpoint. So we actually brought in a new property, which is the direct link behavior. So now I have control over if it's going to do this fallback to direct query. I want it not to. And if it can't do direct link, then I want it to fail, right? So I can actually specify that. I can even do direct query only too, but I'm going to do direct link only, right? And I'm going to come back here. Now I'm going to go to my report here, and I'm going to refresh. And here I'm seeing it's coming back, and it's just doing direct link. It's actually coming back a little bit faster now, because it's not even thinking about that SQLite endpoint anymore. Right, so this is a new property that we just added that will give you some control over that automatic fallback. If you don't want to have it happening, you can now turn it off. Okay, so we have that. And that kind of runs through that experience here. Now I can go ahead and kind of save this, right? So this is my report. I know I have the most fantastic naming style. That's why they don't let me name things in product, thankfully. And I will go ahead and publish this up to the same workspace. Okay. Now, another thing that comes up quite often with direct link is row level security, right? So you just heard me say, don't do it in the SQLite endpoint, because you'll fall back to direct query. You're like, well, how do I keep my thing in direct link and also have some row level security? And I'll show you how to do that. So first, I was going to show you the lineage view here, right? So I have the lakehouse, I have the notebook I used, we have that SQLite endpoint, and you'll see that we have that default one. We have this one I created earlier, and this is one I just created now, and there's that report that I just created, right? So I can click on this report and open it up. So here we have it. We can see that report coming in nicely. Now I have on my blog also, where did I put that screen? One sec. I actually also have how you would set up the row level security, right? So I have how I set up my testing one, and then I have a setup on how to do the row level security. Now let's see if I have. So if you guys are interested in seeing that setup, I'll show you one of the critical steps in setting up the row level security on your semantic model is changing the connection to the lakehouse to be a fixed identity, right? So that means that whenever another person comes to view my report, it's going, right now, you go to your report as me. I am also accessing all the way down to lakehouse and to OneLake as me, right? So in a row level security, right, it makes no sense. You can, if I have full access to the whole table in the lake house, right, the row level security will work in that scenario, but it's only limiting me here. It is a gate without a fence, right? I can go around and get to the data that I want, all that data. So if you do fixed identity, then I have access to the lake house, and then I share my report with somebody who doesn't, right? And then they can only access that data through this gate, and the fence is still intact, right? So let me show you how we do that. So if I go to the settings on the model, right, you'll see in the cloud connections, we have single sign-on, Azure AD, right? Now I want to instead create a connection, And I'm going to say access to lake house. You'll see it's actually SQL Server going through that one. I can say OAuth. It's going to ask me to log in. Now, you don't want to do this, right? So that's just kind of bypassing it in a fallback scenario. So you want to keep that unchecked. Now I'm going to add it in. Okay. Let's see. Did I mess up something? Oh, I already have one called that. So let's call this one too. There we go. And now I'll come back. Now you have to come back. It doesn't actually change it over just yet. So here we go to pick that one, and now I'm applying it. So now I have a fixed identity, okay? So when import users come, they're going to use my identity to go and get them. It's the same as if you did an import, right? So if you did an import, you have access to the SQL database, you have access to the cloud source, right? If you have an Excel file up in OneDrive or something like that, you're going to specify your credentials here to go access it, and then you share the report with somebody else. They're going to go through the semantic model to get at that data that I have permission to, right? Okay, so now I've set that up, right? So now I am doing that, and that's great. If you don't set that up, there will be a couple of clues later on that they'll tell you that you haven't done that step. One of the bigger ones, if you have secured your lakehouse, you're sharing just the report with the report viewer, they all of a sudden will get an error all over their screen saying, I don't have access to the data, right? That's by design, right? They don't have access to the data. They shouldn't see the data. And another one is for testing of the security role. All right, so let's go ahead and set the row level security up. We are going to have a UI. So in the semantic model, if you go to the model here, you'll see there is the row level security UI. And then it's enabled right now because I added a calc group, but you won't be able to use any other tables, right? So if I hit new, you don't see any of the tables. We are going to enabling this soon. But right now, the way you can do it is through XMLA. Actually, I think I do have tabular editor installed. So let me do it, or you can do it through SQL Server if you know how to do it that way. So let's go open up tabular editor and add in that role. To connect to it, you're going to need your workspace connection. So I'm going to copy this guy down here. And see, where is my tabular editor open? Right, so I'm bringing it over here. And I'm going to paste that in. It's going to ask me to log in again. There's also one other step I didn't show, so I will show that really quickly as well. To enable people to use the XML endpoint, you have to go turn that on in your capacity settings as well. So let me show you that real quick. For right now, I'm just going to connect to my semantic model. Right. And then while I'm doing that, I'm going to quickly show you how you would actually go ahead and turn it on your capacity. Right. You also have to have it on your tenant as well. But for the capacity, you can go into the admin portal. You don't need to be a tenant admin. You just need to be an admin on the capacity. For this one, I'm using the trial. So I'm going to click on the capacity settings, go to the trial. Now you don't click on the cog. You can actually click on the name. And in the Power BI workloads, it's going to be kind of at the bottom here, where you can pick kind of read write on that analytics endpoint. You do need that one for the analytics endpoint to work. Right, so let's go back over here. Let's go back to here. And let's just do a simple one. So here I'm going to say new role. I'm going to say Australia only. And then I can set up on my geo table. I know that it is country equals to Australia, right? And then I'm going to change this to read. Right? You can set up the members here. It's a bit more complicated, but you can do that in the service. So I'm going to flip back once I've made this change. Right, so let's go take a look again in the web modeling experience. I'm able to get right back in here. I can continue where I left off. No longer blocked. If I go to the model, I see that role I just created. It wasn't here before. And now I can go back to the workspace over here, and I can go to the security setting, and I can add my demo. My core demo account is going to get added to this. And now I'm going to go and test it. So I can do the testers role here. Now, if you see this error, we're working on it. Don't worry. If you have fixed identity, just hit refresh here, and then it'll work. Hope it works. We're live demoing, right? So then we go testers role, and now it works. It's found that report, and I can test as the Australia only. So now I only see Australia, and I can even do it by my demo account. See? Now, the demo account actually has no access to this report. So this one is interesting, and it will tell you this user does not have access to the data set or the report, which is probably a key thing I need to fix. But this is how you'd also now test this going forward. All right, so that's the row level security. And again, we are going to enable that UI soon. But we're just making sure everything's good, but you can do it right now. Let me see. Any other questions? I think there are some questions in the chat, but that is...
There are a couple coming in, Zoe, so just bear with me. I'm on my own today, so multitasking. So, okay, this question comes in from Jake. It's more of a follow-up, to be honest. This was in regards to how the queries are handled. So Jake mentions that he assumes it's Spark in both cases, but the Formula Engine has different query plans. Formula Engine can assume a direct query source has more functionality than Vertipack, and Direct Lake would be treated like Vertipack.
Yeah, I think that I'm not 100% sure, but I think you're on the right path there.
Excellent, thank you. Next question coming in. This is just a general question from Jude's Ice Cream. Would you be comfortable sharing some of having a run through of your resources at the end?
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that. I usually have it on the slide deck as well, like putting all those links. I didn't put all of them in. I probably should have, but the big one is like for the row of security, what I just did here and how I set this demo up is all on my personal blog, and then the rest are kind of in, the Microsoft blog as well.
Excellent. And we have already linked to your personal blog as well, so please feel free to get that from the chat as well. Moving on to the next one from Daryl Lynch. Are we meant to use the default semantic model created within the warehouse/lakehouse?
Yeah, so that one is a bit limited on functionality. I usually don't demo that one. The full, so the custom one really has that kind of the latest on the web modeling experience and stuff like that. But for this one, it's kind of convenient and it's nice, but it's really made for, if you've gone ahead and added some data to your lake house, now you want to immediately see it in a report, right? We created that automatically for you. But unfortunately, the kind of where it is inside of the SQLitis endpoint is kind of limited on your semantic model functionality. So to want to be able to use the XML endpoint and add all those really cool things like calculation groups, see the model explorer, see all those things, that's when you would want to create the new custom one. Now, when we first did the custom semantic model, we did have we'll bring in the relationships and measures from that default one if you created them there. But then, once you get going, then you really have to manage two models, right? And that was kind of a pain point that we wanted to address. So now when you do a new custom one, you're creating just like you're using Lakehouse as a data source. You're no longer kind of, using that default one as well. And so now you can then it opens up a lot of possibilities. We can just kind of run with all the semantic model features and not worry so much about being so tied to the SQL endpoint that you have with the default. Now, if you wanted to just kind of do just the basic model and have just a easy, quick way to see that data, then by all means, that the default one is great. But if you want to have some more custom, more functionality, some more stuff to do there, go ahead and create the custom one.
Excellent. Thank you for clearing that up for us, Zoe. Moving on to our next question. The floodgates have opened now, so I will
It's all good.
apologize. So this one comes in from Richard Anthony, and he asks, do you have to use the service to create this type of direct lake semantic model, or could I do it in desktop and publish it, for example?
Yeah, so right now you are limited to the service. We want to bring in support for desktop to also do it, but that's still coming. So it is on our roadmap, but for right now, you would have to go, to the Lakehouse and create it there from the new semantic model button, right? So if you come here and then have that new semantic model.
Fantastic, thank you. And the next question coming in from Daryl Lynch. If we create the semantic model in desktop instead of using the new semantic model button, will the RLS be available within Tabular Editor?
So yes, we don't have it creating in desktop just yet, but yeah, when we do, we'd have the row level security in desktop. You can do it in, use your external toolbar ribbon, and get over to the Tablet Editor, bring it back to desktop, which will then go to the service anyway. So yeah, yes, you will. We aim to have all the options available to you to do it however you please.
Excellent, thank you. And last question, this one comes in from Jake Duddy, and this one is Git integration supported?
Yeah, so it was working for a little while, right? We could have the semantic models working, and you can do the PBI and the PBIP, all that kind of stuff. But you had a lot of cool things happening with the Git integration. Right now, they've closed it off. There's some bugs, and they stopped doing that. But we are bringing it back, right? So eventually, we will have the Git integration supported. But right now, it's just not there. We have to do a couple more things before we open that back up again.
Fantastic. Thank you for confirming that for us, Zoe. And that's all the questions for now.
Awesome. So let's see. Right, so now we have, so this is kind of the end of my demo, really. If there's anything anyone wants to see, we can get into, I can show you how to do calc groups, or I can do anything like that. Maybe we'll go do that. That was always a fun one, right? So here I have my model. I have touched it with XMLA. I have done anything I wanted, and I can still get into it and do it into kind of the web modeling. Leon, I'm not quite sure. How much time more do I have to demo to these lovely people?
Excellent. We're just coming up to the 15-minute mark.
Okay, great. So let's go ahead and play around with some calc groups. Tabular Editor, for those who like field parameters, because field parameters are pretty cool, you can actually do that as a script. You can run in Tabular Editor that will add a field parameter to a direct lake as well. That'll work. You'll notice we have kind of these new table and new calc column. The calc column and calc tables are disabled. Calculate tables actually work right now, but you cannot reference the delta tables, right? But as I said earlier, you want to make sure, like if you're creating a kind of a table that you want to use in your model, the best place to create it is in the Lakehouse. Have it as a delta table, and you'll have the best experience for direct lake. And it's the same for calculated columns, right? And this is true in import, right? If you want to have the best experience with calculated columns, you push it upstream as far as possible. A lot of times you can create those in Power Query instead of having them as a DAX column in your model, and that will give you the best performance, right? So now you've offloaded that to the refresh, and life is happy. All right, so then we have, let's see. Okay, so let's go to, right, so I have the direct lake documentation, obviously, has a lot of good information, shows you step-by-step how to do that XMLA, where to find it with pictures. You can go ahead and look at the metadata, right? And you can use SQL Server Management Studio to, access it through XMLA as well. We have some of your limits for resourcing. We have the fallback behavior, right? So we have that new property that I was demonstrating. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. That's a bit big. Maybe down one notch. Okay. So you could do that with XMLA, but now we actually have it in the UI as well. You can kind of not have it automatically syncing, so you can kind of do it on a schedule in a pipeline. You can schedule a refresh, so you can bring in your data, you orchestrate it in a pipeline, use your notebooks, use your data flows, whatever you want to do. And at the end, you can say, okay, yeah, now semantic model. Now you can go get the latest data, right? So you can actually control that whole process. And we have a bunch of known issues and limitations, right? You know, you can only get it from a single lakehouse, right? But you can actually shortcut from other lakehouses into that single lakehouse. So it's kind of a soft restriction. And then you can't do like a full composite, right? So in desktop, you can have direct query table, an import table, hybrid table, dual table, whatever you want. But right now for direct lake, we're kind of limited just to direct lake, except for the whole fallback to direct query. Time date relationships are not allowed. Like date relationships are just fine. And then we have calculate columns not supported. Some data types are not supported. That's a fairly technical one. Most regular ones are just fine. You know, complex delta table column types like binary and GUID semantic types are not supported. They are also unsupported, right? So you just have to convert them to strings or other supported data types. Something about you know, make sure your keys are good for your relationships. And then the one I wanted to get to is just a sometimes unprocessed table will fall back to direct query. That's a if you run into this one, just go and kick off a refresh of the semantic model and you're good to go. And validation is also limited, right? So you saw when I was drag and dropping those relationships, it was trying to populate to show the data, but we're not actually validating those just yet. So we just be careful when you're creating relationships. There's a lot of validation that happens in desktop when you create an import, right? We check to make sure that it's unique. We check to make sure that things are lining up, right? We've disabled a lot of those checks because they run queries. And we want to kind of bring that in a way where you can kind of opt out. So you're not using your capacity to kind of run things that you're not aware that you're running. All right, so this is just the latest one that I went through. But if I go back to, if I click me, then I can see. So we have this is when we added the Model Explorer to the web modeling experience. And then if we get into this guy, this one has examples of how to create different calc groups. Like so we have I have a daily average as example, and I have a time intelligence example. So let's go ahead and do the time intelligence one, right? So let's go back to here, and I'm in my calc group. Let me see if I can rename this. We had a time intelligence. Okay, and then I could do show as, so I can rename my table, my column, and I have my first one here, so I'm just going to replace it with the first one there, and I can create new calc items here. Let me just go ahead and split the screen a little so we can see it side by side. And we'll bring in this one here. Oops. See if it'll work for me. There it goes. Right. So now we can see these ones side by side, so I can just kind of copy paste through. Right. So I can add in the next one. And you can do this in Tablet Editor if you wanted to as well, right? You're not limited to this. We just added the UI, so we can do it here as well. Right. A little bit tedious once you already got them all built. Right. And I'm probably just going to go. I'm probably not going to do the whole lot of them, but then I want to show you the dynamic format string that you can do. We can't do the dynamic format strings on measures in Direct Lake UI right now. You can if you use the XMLA. It's not limited at all. We're just bringing in that UI, and so we're working through that process now. So it just takes us a bit to sometimes enable some features. Just want to make sure we do our due diligence. Right, and then we have a year-over-year one. Okay. And the year-over-year percentage. Okay. Oops, not that one. And we want want to go to new calc item. All right. So now here I've created these. I can click on here and reorder them, right? Each time I reorder. So now I can get them in the exact order that I want. So maybe we'll do prior year here, month to date, quarter date, year to date, year-over-year, and year-over-year percent. The year-over-year percentage one, so when you use these calc items on a measure, it brings in the whatever they're formatted as, right? So for the year-over-year, that may not be exactly what you want. We'll use a dynamic to change it to a percentage instead. So it doesn't have to be complicated. The dynamic format string can be a very complicated string. A DAX formula, it can, check things and pull data from the model, anything you'd like, or it can just be a string value. And then we can switch back between the item and the format in this left nav, just like you can do in desktop. All right, so now, then you can go and see that here. So let's go, now this one, let's see, where is my report, right? And so then you can kind of bring in, now I just need to refresh my visuals, which I can do here in the optimize ribbon. I can see my calc group. Let's see, refresh, come on guys. I see. And then, I see it's refreshing. So let's give it a minute and we can test that out. The other thing to be careful of with calc groups, just in general, right, is I have a whole section down here as well about some additional scenarios, right? You can specify in a calc item if you want it to not apply to certain measures. Like sometimes I have a title that I've created for a visual in a measure, like a title for conversion. So if I did fill parameters and now I have a dynamic title, right, when I apply my calc group, it's going to try and convert that string measure to something numeric, and it's going to throw an error, right? So what I would do is in my calculation item say, hey, if you see this measure name, just leave it alone and just say pass it through. Another one, like from the conversion, we also want it maybe not to work on, we don't want it to convert, we want it to convert numeric measures, but not maybe like an order count, right? Converting orders into a different currency is really not, number of orders is not really a good scenario. So you can do that as well. So I have some of those examples down here on how you can set those up. And you have to also set them up in any dynamic format string you're using on a measure as well, right? And then you have best experience, what you want it to do, and all of that information. All right, so this is kind of through here. All right, let's see if I can get, this has come back. Looks like it's not actually updating, so I'll take a look at that later. And we can probably just, so I can really quickly show you how to do this in the web as well, right? So you can quickly create this here and you can, create anything. Now you'll notice I didn't schedule, like the cool thing about DirectLate is it's just accessing that data, right? Actually, one of the things I did want to show was something new that we created. So if I've changed something, right, how do I get these new changes to show up, right? This is kind of a critical one. You would just go back to the edit tables. Like if I want to bring in a new table, and if you can confirm, it's going to go and actually grab any column changes. So if you renamed a column, you added a column in the lake house, you want to bring it now into the semantic model, you can go ahead and do that. Or something, maybe someone renamed or removed a table and now it's not really working properly, you need to go back and do a schema refresh. That's how you would do it. That's just some new functionality we added. So you just have to come in here. Eventually we'll want to bring in, like, say, a refresh button and all that. But for now, we just have it using the edit tables functionality. All right. Any other last questions? I think that's about all for my demo. So if there's any other last questions, I'd love to hear.
Fantastic. Thank you, Zoe. There are quite a few. So let me...
I wasn't paying attention for a minute.
That's okay. Let's see what we can get through. So this one comes in from Daryl. And what are the options for hiding those default from Excel or One Data Hub?
I don't think we have a mechanism for that just yet. For me, the default semantic model created off the SQLines endpoint when you create the lakehouse. I'm not sure we have a path for that just yet, but I'm not 100% sure either. So sorry.
Excellent, thank you. The next question comes in from Simone Mirabelli. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is there any strategy to migrate from Azure Analysis Services tabular model to a Fabric semantic model in Direct Lake?
So that's a great question, right? We have the Azure Analysis Services migration tool that'll take it into the premium capacity. But that's still an import model or direct query model, right? It's not Direct Lake. So we are looking at kind of how do we help you with those scenarios. But no, we don't have it like a check mark on that migration tool. That would be really cool, but we don't have that just yet. But it is something we're looking into. And even just, going from import models to Direct Lake, like how do we kind of migrate those over? One of the things you can do right now is with the OneLake integration is if you have, so say you've migrated it over, you can at least turn on the OneLake integration, and then the resulting tables in your semantic model can be available in the OneLake for other workloads, right? So it's not the same as now they're refreshing and putting the data in a lake house, but you would refresh them kind of in your usual refresh schedule, right? So getting those data in the import model through the Power Query, and you schedule a refresh. And then when that happens, they're actually now available to other workloads as OneLake tables. I think I was trying to see, obviously I have it in my import model. I'm trying to remember which workspace I had it in. I have a bunch of demo ones. Let me see if I can find it. But then I can quickly show you kind of the OneLake integration. I also need to revisit my naming schedule. Aha, I found it. Success. Right. So this is my import data, and I'm actually using that SQLines endpoint that I generated, importing it to desktop, creating an import model, publishing it back up. So it's very circular right now, but obviously not in real life scenarios are they quite so circular. Now if I go to the settings here, we have some errors as these, but I have my credentials, and if I go down to, you have to have it in a large semantic model storage, and you can do OneLake integration. So when it's refreshed, it's actually going to show up in that OneLake. And you saw that when I went into that shortcut menu off the Lakehouse, I can see this model, and I can see the tables, and I can bring them in. So obviously, I think it got turned off because I hadn't been using it.
No problem at all. Fantastic. Thank you, Zoe. I'm just going to piggyback that question if I can. I know it's slightly different, but I think if we can encapsulate it into one, it makes sense. So no, that's the case for AAS. The question we get asked is similar migration paths for Synapse.
For Synapse, yeah. So I'm not quite sure there, to be honest.
No problem at all. Moving onwards, let's go ahead and we'll give this one to Jake as well. So Jake's asked if fallback is enabled to direct query and it goes down the fallback route, can we expect aggregations to come in the future?
That's a great question. I'll have to check with them because I think I want to say kind of yes is the answer, but I'm not 100% sure, right? It would make sense, right? So then we can have, at least if it's falling back to direct query. But honestly, if you really think the model is going to operate in direct query, you just want to do it in direct query native, to be honest. But I'm not 100% sure on this one, but I'll double check on that one.
Fantastic. Thank you, Zoe. And I think we have time for these last two. They're both coming in from Daryl. So Daryl, you have the spotlight. So this question is, will Power BI Vertipack or BIM eventually switch to Delta Parquet?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of that would be the cool part, right? Why are we even having this, even an import, have it all just go to the OneLake, right? Definitely conversations that, well, why not? That'd be really cool. So yeah, so maybe I'll just tease that one a little, and then we'll see how it goes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Darryl, we were going to give you all of the spotlight, so you can have this next question, but we have a final one coming in from Rishi as well, and that will be the final one. So this question, Zoe, is do we need to consider optimizing or partitioning larger lakehouse or warehouse tables? There are options to identify when this is necessary.
Yeah, so that is a great question. I don't actually have a good answer for that one either. Yes, you can do some optimizing and partitioning there. I'm not sure we have any kind of docs on that, so it's a fantastic question. But that kind of information will be coming soon. I don't know it off the top of my head. One of the big ones is kind of that we want to guard against is if you have the direct lake and ensure these larger delta tables are not falling back to direct query, right? So they do happen if like row groups are too high and stuff like that. And so that may get into that kind of question. But I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry. You have really good questions.
Excellent. We do have an educated bunch with us in this user group. So I mean, what we will do though is once some answers to these questions become available in the future, we would absolutely love to have you back. So I know you're familiar with Rishi. So Rishi has got in with the last question of this session, and his question is: are there any limitations with Copilot working on top of Direct Lake? He mentions that he's tried it and it doesn't seem to work, but not sure if that's related or not.
Yeah, I'm not actually familiar with any Copilot restrictions off the direct lake, right? So if you're not seeing it work, reach out to me. We'd love to troubleshoot it further. But as far as I know, there's no, I mean, it's supposed to work with direct lake. The Fabric Copilot is supposed to be there to help you, especially in these kind of scenarios. So let me know, email me, let me know if you're seeing any issues there. But no, the Copilot should be working just fine.
Fantastic. And that's all of the questions that we have coming in this evening. So I just want to say absolutely fantastic session. I really appreciate you taking the time to walk through that for us in a very explainable way for people that are new to this type of technology, and also with a lot of detail for experienced users as well. It's been fantastic.
Well, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to have this opportunity to kind of go over this direct lake and kind of how we're thinking about it, and how we're expecting it to be kind of used, and how to use it so you get the most out of direct lake.
Absolutely. And like I say, we would love to have you back with us in the near future.
Sounds good.
Fantastic. Thank you very much once again. And I'll just go ahead and close this evening's session. So just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you've been here with us at the Microsoft Fabric UK user group. I've been your host, Leon Gordon. Unfortunately, Pragati Jain has not been too well to be able to join us this evening, but please do continue to leave your feedback on our feedback form. We want to continue to bring you top tier experts like we've done this evening, and bring you topics that you want to enjoy, you want to learn as well. So please do keep letting us know. As I say, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you've been here with us at the Microsoft Fabric UK user group. Stay safe.